A record executive confidently predicted that Elvis would be forgotten in 6 months because guitar music has no future. 60 years later, we're still talking about Elvis, and nobody remembers that executive's name. It was a gray Tuesday morning in September 1954, and 19-year-old Elvis Presley was sitting in the waiting room of Decca Records' Nashville office, clutching a brown envelope that contained his demo tape. His palms were sweating, his leg was bouncing nervously, and his heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the room could hear it. This was his big chance. Sun Records had released That's All Right a few months earlier, and it had been getting decent regional play. But Sun was a tiny independent label with limited distribution. If Elvis wanted to become a national star, he needed a major label behind him. And Decca was one of the biggest. His manager, Bob Neal, had worked for weeks to arrange this meeting. Decca's head of A&R, a man named Paul Cohen, had agreed to listen to Elvis's demo and meet with him in person. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. Elvis Presley, a secretary appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Cohen will see you now." Elvis stood up, smoothed his hair, and followed her down a long hallway lined with gold records. He looked at the names on those records, Bing Crosby, the Andrews sisters, Bill Monroe, and felt a surge of hope. Maybe someday his name would be on this wall too. The secretary opened a door to a large corner office. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat Paul Cohen, a balding man in his 50s with a cigar in one hand and a dismissive expression on his face. He didn't stand up when Elvis entered. "So you're the kid from Memphis," Cohen said, not bothering to hide his lack of enthusiasm. "Sit down. Let's hear what you've got." Elvis handed over his demo tape, and Cohen's secretary put it on the record player in the corner of the office. The opening notes of That's All Right filled the room. Elvis watched Cohen's face carefully, looking for any sign of approval. But the executive's expression remained stony, unimpressed. He listened for about 30 seconds, then waved his hand. "Turn it off," Cohen said. The secretary lifted the needle. The room fell silent. "Kid, let me ask you something," Cohen said, leaning back in his leather chair. "What exactly do you think you're doing with that sound?" Elvis wasn't sure how to answer. "I'm just singing the way I feel, sir. Mixing up different styles that I like." Mixing up different styles. Cohen repeated the words like they tasted bad. "The kids." Cohen waved his hand dismissively. "Kids don't buy records in any significant numbers. Their parents do. And parents want real music, orchestra music, crooners, professional singers who can actually carry a tune without banging on a guitar like a chimpanzee." He pointed his cigar at Elvis. "You want to know what the future of music is? It's sophisticated pop. It's big bands. It's singers who went to conservatory and learned proper technique, not some kid from Tennessee who learned 3 chords and thinks he's a musician." Elvis wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain that his music was connecting with people in a way that sophisticated pop never did. But Cohen wasn't finished. "I've been in this business for 25 years, Cohen continued. "I've seen fads come and go. Swing was going to last forever. It didn't. Bebop was going to change everything. It didn't. And this guitar music, this rock and roll nonsense, it's the same thing. A flash in the pan, a temporary insanity that America will get over soon enough." He leaned forward, looking Elvis directly in the eyes. "You want my prediction? In 6 months, nobody will remember your name. You'll be back in Memphis driving a truck or working in a factory, and you'll realize that chasing this guitar music dream was the biggest waste of time in your life." Elvis sat frozen, absorbing every word like punches to the gut. "My advice?" Cohen stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. "Learn to play piano, take some voice lessons, come back in a few years when you've got some actual talent and the world has moved on from this guitar nonsense. Then maybe we can talk." He pressed a button on his desk. "Martha, show Mr. Presley out." Elvis stood on shaky legs. "Mr. Cohen, if you'd just give me a chance to perform live, I could show you—" "The answer is no, son. Decca Records doesn't sign acts that are going to be forgotten in 6 months. We have a reputation to maintain." The secretary appeared at the door. Elvis had no choice but to leave. As he walked out of that office, past all those gold records on the wall, Elvis felt something he'd never felt before, a cold, burning determination that went beyond hurt, beyond anger, beyond anything he could name. He got in his car and sat there for a long time, replaying Cohen's words in his head. Guitar music is dying. You'll be forgotten in 6 months. This rock and roll nonsense. Then Elvis did something that would become a pattern in his life. He pulled out a small notebook from his glove compartment and wrote down exactly what Cohen had said. Every word, every dismissive phrase, every confident prediction about how Elvis would fail and be forgotten. Underneath those words, Elvis wrote, September 1954. Remember this date. Then he started his car and drove back to Memphis, already planning his next move. What Paul Cohen didn't understand, what he couldn't understand from his corner office surrounded by gold records from a dying era, was that music was changing. The young people who were buying Elvis's records and screaming at his concerts weren't interested in their parents' music. They wanted something that felt real, that felt alive, that spoke to their energy and their rebellion and their desire for something new. Guitar music wasn't dying, it was being born. And Elvis was one of the midwives. Over the next few months, Elvis worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. He played every show he could book. He drove thousands of miles across the South. He refined his sound, his stage presence, his ability to connect with audiences. And everywhere he went, teenagers went crazy for his music. In January 1956, Elvis signed with RCA Records, a label even bigger than Decca, for an unprecedented $40,000. His first RCA single, Heartbreak Hotel, was released in January and shot to #1 on the charts. By March, Elvis was appearing on national television. By summer, he was the biggest star in America. By the end of the year, he had released his first album, starred in his first movie, and become a cultural phenomenon that nobody, least of all Paul Cohen, had predicted. And guitar music, the thing that was supposedly dying, it exploded into the dominant force in popular music, launching rock and roll into an era that would change the world forever. In the fall of 1956, almost exactly 2 years after Paul Cohen had told Elvis he'd be forgotten in 6 months, Elvis received a letter at Graceland. It was from Decca Records, not from Cohen himself, but from the label's new president. The letter was an offer. Decca wanted to sign Elvis to a multi-album deal. They were willing to pay whatever it took to bring him to their label. Elvis read the letter, smiled, and wrote back a single sentence. I remember when Mr. Cohen told me guitar music was dying. How's that prediction working out? He never heard from Decca again. As for Paul Cohen, his career at Decca began to crumble almost immediately after he rejected Elvis. The label's market share plummeted as rock and roll took over the charts, and Decca was left with a roster of crooners and big band acts that nobody wanted to hear anymore. Cohen was quietly forced out of his executive position in 1958. He spent the rest of his career working as a minor producer for independent labels, watching from the sidelines as the guitar music he'd declared dead became the foundation of modern popular music. In 1962, a journalist tracked Cohen down and asked him about his famous prediction that Elvis would be forgotten in 6 months. I don't want to talk about that, Cohen said. It was a different time. Nobody could have predicted what was going to happen. But that wasn't true. Plenty of people had predicted it. Sam Phillips at Sun Records had predicted it. The teenagers lining up to buy Elvis's records had predicted it. The kids screaming at his concerts had predicted it. The only people who hadn't seen it coming were executives like Cohen, too comfortable in their corner offices to notice that the world was changing around them. Elvis kept that notebook entry about Cohen's prediction for the rest of his life. In interviews, he occasionally mentioned it without naming Cohen directly. A record executive once told me that guitar music was dying and I'd be forgotten in 6 months, Elvis would say with a slight smile. I think about that sometimes, especially when I'm playing guitar for 20,000 screaming fans. There was never any bitterness in Elvis's voice when he told the story. If anything, there was gratitude. Cohen's rejection had lit a fire in Elvis that drove him to work harder, perform better, and prove every doubter wrong. That man did me a favor, Elvis told a friend in the 1970s. If Decca had signed me in 1954, who knows what would have happened? Maybe they would have tried to change my sound, make me into another crooner. Maybe I would have gotten comfortable and stopped pushing myself. But getting rejected like that, being told I had no future, that made me hungry. That made me determined to prove him wrong. Elvis also learned something important from Cohen's rejection, something that shaped how he treated young artists for the rest of his career. He learned that the people in power don't always know what they're talking about. He learned that confidence and credentials don't equal wisdom. And he learned that sometimes the most successful thing you can do is ignore the experts and trust your own instincts. When some big shot tells you that you're wrong, that your dreams are foolish, that the thing you love is dying, Elvis once said, remember that they're just guessing. They don't know the future any better than you do. They're just protecting what they already know because they're scared of what they don't understand. The story of Elvis and Paul Cohen became legendary in the music industry, a cautionary tale about the danger of arrogance and the importance of staying connected to what audiences actually want. Every year, music executives reject artists who go on to become superstars. Every year, confident predictions about what's dying and what's the future turn out to be spectacularly wrong. And every year, young artists who get rejected have to decide whether to listen to the experts or trust their own vision. Paul Cohen was absolutely certain that guitar music had no future. He bet his reputation on it. He was so confident that he didn't just reject Elvis. He lectured him, mocked him, predicted his failure with the certainty of someone who couldn't imagine being wrong. 60 years later, guitar music is still the foundation of rock, pop, country, and countless other genres. Elvis Presley is still one of the most famous names in the world. His music still played on radio stations every single day. And Paul Cohen? Nobody remembers his name. That's the thing about confident predictions. They sound impressive in the moment. They make the person saying them feel smart and powerful and in control. But the future doesn't care about your predictions. The future doesn't care about your credentials or your experience or your certainty. The future belongs to the people who create it, the artists and dreamers and rebels who refuse to accept that the thing they love is dying, who keep playing their guitars even when the experts tell them it's pointless, who trust their instincts over the opinions of people who've stopped being able to hear anything new. Elvis could have listened to Paul Cohen. He could have put down his guitar, learned piano, tried to become the kind of sophisticated crooner that Decca wanted. He could have accepted that guitar music was dying and that his dreams were foolish. Instead, he kept playing, he kept performing, he kept trusting his instincts. Years later, when young musicians would ask Elvis for advice about dealing with rejection from record labels, he always told them the same thing. The people behind those desks think they know everything because they've been doing it for 20 years. But that's exactly why they can't see what's coming next. They're experts in what already happened, not what's about to happen. If someone in a suit tells you your music has no future, that probably means you're doing something they've never seen before. And that's exactly what the world needs. Elvis made it a personal mission to never become like Paul Cohen. Even when he was the biggest star in the world, he stayed curious about new sounds and new artists. He listened to everything, respected musicians from every genre, and never dismissed something just because he didn't understand it immediately. He remembered what it felt like to be that kid in the chair, being told his dreams were worthless by someone who couldn't hear the future. And in doing so, he didn't just prove one arrogant executive wrong, he changed the course of popular music forever. A record executive confidently predicted that Elvis would be forgotten in 6 months because guitar music had no future. 60 years later, that prediction stands as one of the worst calls in music industry history. Elvis became eternal. Guitar music conquered the world, and the executive who was so certain about the future became a forgotten footnote in someone else's story. If this story of arrogant prediction and ultimate vindication inspired you, make sure to subscribe and share this video. Let us know in the comments if someone ever told you that the thing you love is dying or has no future. Sometimes the experts are wrong. Sometimes the future belongs to the people who refuse to accept their predictions.